Hey guys, welcome to my channel, QRPB's Music Crime Time. Sorry about the wait. I'm here now and ready to go. I've been meaning to do this live for a few days now, so please share, like and subscribe. Thank you for being here. This is about the Columbine High School shooting. In 1999, students Eric Harrison and Dylan Calbod would embark on a massacre that would make history and the name of one of Colorado's high school sigmas with tragedy. Children were running from the school at breakneck speed and knew that the world had changed. As the clock ticked, the body count rose. They would pop underneath a table. They would saw something. They would say something like peekaboo, and they would pew someone. And with the question, why have these two young men waged war on their classmates and teachers and committed the world's most notorious unaliving spree? What caused them to have so much hatred? They were willing to walk in and unalive as many people as possible. I'm just going to show you guys a video to do with this crime. Please bear with me while I find those videos. Again, thank you for coming, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks. Right, let's get on with this. So, we will find these videos. Okay. There we go. Share. YouTube. So, I have a playlist with these ones in, so we'll go straight into it. We've just got an ad at the beginning. We'll just wait for that to do its thing. I hope you're all having a great day, by the way. Please share this as well. Thank you. Thank you for watching that video with me. And here's some more about it. In 1999, the area of Columbine on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, had been the epitome of ordinary. It's a suburban area. It's pretty quiet, not a lot of crime. It's overwhelming white middle class, which is to say a very homogeneous place. But one spring day in 1999 would bring the unremarkable neighborhood worldwide minority. Tom's 15-year-old son made his way to Columbine High School. For fellow students, 16-year-old Craig Scott and his 17-year-old sister Rachel, the morning had not started harmoniously. Around 11:19 a.m., Columbine School West entrance, Sean Graves and his friend worlds were about to change forever. One floor above in the library, Craig and his friend Matt was sitting revising, but this was no prank. A nightmare that would shook the world had just begun. At approximately 11:19 a.m. on the 20th of April 1999, a deadly unaliving spree had begun at Columbine High School in Colorado. Outside the school cafeteria, 15-year-old student Sean Graves and his friend Dan and Lance were being pew-pewed on by two teenagers dressed in black trench coats. What Sean had originally thought was a prank was far from it. Sean lay in the doorway of the cafeteria, and for hundreds of students inside, the reality of what was happening was beginning to sink in. Over the prior year, the two mystery pupillers had made several extraordinary videos, both spoof and series that were chillingly similar to the spree to come. The violent merciless attacks played out in the videos had now become a reality. At Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, Detective Kate Batten was just returning from an early lunch. 6 weeks earlier, March the 16th, 1999, in the mountains south of Columbine, the two pupillers recorded another video. This time, the weapons were real. Both were students of Columbine High School, just weeks away from graduating. 17-year-old Dylan Kalbold and 18-year-old Eric Harrison, now both Harrison and Kalbold, seemed intent on the destruction of the school and everyone in it. By 11:27 a.m., the two pupillers were in an area near the library where Craig Scott and numerous fellow students were working, still lying paralyzed in the cafeteria doorway. 15-year-old Sean could do nothing but listen. After several minutes pew-pewing and throwing homemade bombs in the corridor outside, Harris and Kalbold now approached the library entrance, where the teacher was under the desk on the line to 911 dispatch. Dylan Kalbold was born in Colorado and at the time of the pew-pewing was living in his parents' designer home in the desirable natural area just outside the town. Eric Harrison background was also far off from underprivileged. Eric's father was ex-military. Eric Harrison and Dylan Kalbold were both deeply into computers and both complained that they were victims of bullying by sporty students known as jocks. After settling in the Columbine area, Harris became friends with Kalbold and as such also hung out with Dylan's friends Brooke Brown. So I'm just going to show you some more videos, guys. Again, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thanks.
Viara, what are we exploring?
wait for this ad to finish. Actually, we can just go straight to the next video. Just wait for this ad. Hurry up. Okay, right. Here we go.
Took place at Columbine High School in 1999, and now I'm a high school teacher and I teach seniors. They know my story, and me being vulnerable and open with them, and became the trusted adult for many of them. I want others to know that it does get better. I promise. I am a survivor, and you are too.
I survived, and I'm forever the survivor of a school shooting. On April 20th, 1999, I was a 17-year-old junior in a high school in the suburbs of Denver called Columbine. I was in my 5th hour choir class when we started to hear popping sounds from a distance. We didn't think it was anything, but in a matter of a few minutes, students were running down the hallway outside our classroom, and one student came in and told us there were shooters. At that point, most of the students ran out of the classroom, but some of us, including myself, stayed where we were, unsure of what to do. And as the sound of gunfire and explosions drew closer and closer, eventually about 40 of us barricaded ourselves into a small teacher's office. We didn't know exactly what was happening, but most of us assumed we were in the final moments of our lives. And so in this tiny, cramped, hot room, some students began to call family members to say goodbye. And we held each other and we waited for nearly 3 hours. Eventually, the SWAT team came and helped us evacuate. Our path of escape took us within a few feet of some of our recently fallen classmates. And the trauma of the moment hit like a flood. We were safe, but so many others were not. 2 fellow classmates had shot and killed 12 students and a teacher, injuring many more before ultimately taking their own lives. I survived, and I'm forever the survivor of a school shooting that doesn't leave you, that stays with you. And initially, I was a person who felt this deep sense of responsibility to take action. I shared my story a lot. I talked about the legacy of my friends who died that day. I gave tons of media interviews. I found a lot of healing in many of those moments. But at times, the sense of mission or providing answers was less than productive. I think about my fellow survivors that day and how a similar trauma can affect people so differently. I have guilt around the fact that I don't deal with the anxiety or PTSD-like symptoms that many of my friends have dealt with for years, even to this day. So for me, sharing my story was something empowering, but for many survivors, it wasn't. At times you want to avoid that part of your story that hurts the most, but you really can't. And so being a survivor of a school shooting has affected my whole life. In the years since, I've often sat with people in the midst of their own trauma, and I'm able to be uniquely present in those moments because of what I experienced at Columbine. Professionally, I work on community-based issues and human rights challenges, and I know my decision to do that is rooted in my experience at Columbine that day. Being a survivor lives with me as I navigate parenthood as the father of 4 kids, the oldest of whom started high school this year. And so parenthood is this act of trust. It's so many times already, but being a survivor can press that to new levels. So there are mornings when I drop off my son at high school and I say, Elijah, I love you, I'll see you tonight. And I know he can't possibly understand the scenarios that run through my mind as he walks away. I've been recently struck watching survivors of new school shootings as they emerge and share their raw stories. I ask myself, how is this still happening? And what more could we have done? You look at their faces and you see yourself in them. You know how much they have in front of them, and you wish there was someone that could tell them there's someone who understands how you feel, because we do. I had a friend recently remind me that as human beings, we are meaning makers and meaning seekers. Almost 20 years after I survived the shootings at Columbine High School, I'm still wrestling with making meaning out of this part of my story. But more than anything, I'm simply grateful to have that chance.
So, yeah. So going on about that, the 20th of April 1999 at 11:29 a.m. Columbine High School, Western Side, Eric Harrison and Dylan Calbold entered the library where 4 staff members and 52 students were hiding. Nobody, whatever their race, sex or social status, no one would be safe from the unaliving spree. What would happen next in that library would horrify the world. Throughout 1998 and early 1999, Columbine school students Eric Harrison and Dylan Calbold had made a number of home videos themed around violence. On April the 20th, just weeks before they were both due to graduate, fantasy became reality. At 11:29 a.m., they entered the library. Like his fellow students, 16-year-old Craig Scott was hiding under a table with his friends Matt and Isaiah. 911 dispatcher Renee was listening into a phone line left open at the library desk. They were enjoying themselves. 3 would be pew-pewed, unalived, and 4 injured before Harris and Calbold worked their way towards Craig Scott. 5 more students would lose their lives, leaving 10 unalived and 12 injured in the deadly library spree before Harris and Calbold left the room at 11:36 a.m. and began wreaking further havoc around the school. SWAT sniper Gene was one of the several law enforcement officers with children at the school. Hundreds of emergency personnel were flocking to the school. There was ambulances and fire trucks and police cars and sheriff's cars parked everywhere, and children were running from the school at breakneck speeds as fast as they could. Amongst the confusion, the name of one suspect began to trickle out. It would be revealed that Eric Harrison's behavior had already been seriously worrying some people. Disputes like the incident with the broken windshield had put Brown on Harrison's hit list. Dylan, who was still friends with and had been lifelong friends with Brooks to go to a website and see what was going on. Harrison and Calbold plan involves something much worse than homemade pipe bomb grenades, as Sean Graves, still paralyzed and bleeding half inside the cafeteria door, was about to experience. Harris and Calbold's unaliving spree had not just been planned as a pew-pewing before they had opened fire. That morning, they had placed 2 large explosives devices in the canteen. They had been timed to explode at 11:17 a.m. and that 2 students had planned to wait outside to pick on any survivors fleeing the scene. The bomb's timers had not worked, which is why Harris and Calbold have begun their unaliving spree with their pew-pews. However, they have not given up on the dream of blowing up the school. So I'm going to show some more videos. I hope you're enjoying the live so far, guys. Yeah, it's pretty sad what's happened here in Columbine High School. Just waiting for the list to come up.
Jefferson County 911. Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He has shot out a window.
Okay, guys. Their new attempts to detonate the bombs only succeeded in a relatively small partial explosion and fire, but they were a sign of a highly planned, premeditated suicide mission. These two students did not just snap Brooks Brown's mother experienced Eric's excuses when his father sent him around to say sorry for damaging their son's windscreen. Together, Eric Harrison and Dylan Calbold had become a deadly partnership, and the two unalivers were now wreaking havoc not only inside the school but outside too. As parents feared for the fate of their children, many parents, including Daniel Mouse's father, learnt of the unfolding events through the media. At the nearby elementary school, many parents would be reunited with their traumatized kids by 12:02 p.m. Columbine High School cafeteria rear exit. Student Sean Graves, bleeding profusely, had passed out. Meanwhile, two medic units approached his location, holed up amongst the unalived and injured in the library. Eric Harris and Dylan Calbold now had their pew-pews aimed on the paramedics and casualties below. By 12:02 p.m. on the 20th of April 1999, Eric Harrison and Dylan Calbold had been running amok in Columbine High School for more than 40 minutes, leaving a trail of unalived and injured in the wake. Then, as fire departments, paramedics moved in to assist the casualties, like Sean Graves and his friends, Harris and Calbold began firing on the kids and rescuers. It would be amongst the last acts of Harris and Calbold unaliving spree. At around 12:08 p.m., Eric Harrison and Dylan Calbold took their own lives, but for the children of Columbine High School and their parents, the nightmare was far from over. But for some desperate parents clinging on to the hope that their children would be returned, there was to be no happy ending for Craig Scott, who had suffered the trauma of having his friends unalived beside him in a library. There was worse to come when he learnt of the fate of his sister, what caused these two students, both just weeks away from graduating, to have such disdain for human life. Some consider bullying at the school to be the primary factor for the Columbine teachers, students, and parents. It would never be the same again. For 911 dispatcher Renee, who listened as 10 children were unalived in the library, and knew a more enormity of what she heard soon hit home. So I'll just show you some more videos. Wait for this to finish. And here we go.
I was in math, and then we heard what it sounded like, girls screaming. The fire alarm rang. One of my social studies teachers blocked traffic across Pierce to get us across to Leawood. And we were there for what seemed like an eternity. And then chaos kind of erupted. One of my best friends came out and said, "Mandy, we have to go. They're shooting." And I said, "Who's shooting?" And there was a lot of rumors that they were on the roof. By that time, news helicopters had come, and there was a rumor, they're shooting at the helicopters. It went crazy. So then that was the time when we saw some staff members, and like Zach, I was very concerned about my math test. And so she said, "You need to go to a safe place." And we're like, "What does that mean?" She said, "Find a house, go to a house." And so we essentially kind of got permission to go. Well, somebody said, hey, go to so-and-so's house, his dad's a cop. So I just followed this group of kids. I bet there was 50 of us. We got on there were a couple people who had cell phones, but this lady's house, she gave the phone to different people, and in my head, it didn't occur to me to call anybody. Like, who do I call? So then I was in Young Life at the time, and my Young Life leader happened to be at that house, and he said, Mandy, you need to call your mom. My mom was at King Carl. She was a teacher, and I couldn't get a hold of her because they were out lockdown, apparently. And now, years later, I was the first one to get a hold of her. And so everybody that called my mom, like family members, knew I was safe. I don't know, for some reason, I had this instinct that my dad would come and get me. So this kid's brother said, hey, does anybody need a ride to Leawood? And I said, I do. Like, I know my dad's gonna be there. My dad worked at the King Soopers down the street. We went to Leawood, and it was, of course, chaos. And it was kind of surreal. My friends that I just left were in science, and I knew them that they were in science. Their parents were there. Well, unfortunately, they didn't get out hours later. My dad found me, and I was wearing a dress that day because it was a track day, and we always dressed up for sports, and he wouldn't let go. And as a parent now, it's hard to realize what my dad went through that day. And I didn't think anything of it until I became a parent. And how my parents must have felt that day. And years later, I went to both of my parents and said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry the way I acted. Because now I get it. Now I get it. And same, it's surreal. You don't know where you are, what you're doing, and you go home and you just live through it and try to get through it as much as you can. And it didn't affect me as much as it has until I became a mom.
So I was in the math department, and I was in the process of taking a quiz, and I just retrieved my calculator, and I just sat down, and I heard some raised voices out in the hall, and I had assumed they were some kids goofing around, or maybe a scuffle or a fight had broken out, and then the fire alarm gets pulled almost immediately, and once again, made the assumption some kids were screwing around, and maybe a fight had started and nobody knew how to respond to it, so somebody pulled the fire alarm so the teachers would be drawn to it. I didn't know. So yeah, we all stood up, kind of lackadaisically. I remember looking down at my desk and thinking what I wanted to take outside with me, as I was, not taking the fire drill very seriously. And then a teacher from the math department throws the door open and braces the door open with his body and says, "Get out of here!" And so we all realized, okay, this is serious. And I remember the thought that occurred to me was, oh, it's an actual fire. There's really a fire, and it's very near, apparently. So we're all getting up and moving towards the door, and he is throwing us out the door, grabbing us by the scruff of the neck and pushing us out of the door. And same situation, we're kind of, not really walking, but we're kind of, sauntering down the hall trying to get out of the building, but not taking it very seriously until we see kids race down the main hall. And at that point we realized, okay, yeah, this is a very serious situation. We get out here, and we spent, I don't know how long. There are parts of my memory that make it seem like it was an hour and a half, and there are other parts of my memory that make it seem like it was no more than 5 minutes. We spend a period of time in Leawood, just across the street from Columbine, trying to figure out what's going on, because none of us knew. And so we're talking to, there's 1,000 of us milling around out there, and we're talking to our friends, trying to hear what's going on. And it's kind of a similar situation in terms of the story started to escalate in severity. And at first it was somebody brought a gun and it accidentally went off. And then somebody else said, no, somebody brought a gun and they used it very deliberately. And then somebody said, oh, it was an automatic weapon. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then I've spoken to a number of people who were around that area at that time, and I think Mandy was one of them, and totally different memory of how things started. I remember it crystal clear, and I don't know if I fabricated it, but I remember telling the police the next day that we were all kind of walking around for a while trying to figure out what's going on, and then I remember hearing explosions that were probably the pipe bombs going off by the library, or in the library. And we all just stopped. This eerie silence hit the park, and we all stopped and looked at the building. And then I remember hearing something that sounded like shots, and then everybody just took off into the neighborhood. Everyone spilled over into the Leawood Park, and there were kids jumping over fences into backyards. And I remember a couple friends and I were sprinting down the street, and we take an immediate left and then a right, and kind of just trying to get away from the building as soon as possible. And this woman was outside tending to her garden because it just snowed just before. And she sees all these kids run down the street, and she's like, "What's going on?" And there's a problem at the school. There's something going on at the school. So she welcomes, it had to have been about 30 kids into her house. And so 30 of us spill into this woman's house. And the same situation as Zach, I remember calling my mom to tell her that I was okay and to figure out what's going on. But, I tried to find out something about my brother, because he was going to the school at the time, and my cousin, and couldn't find out anything. Called my mom. She said she hadn't yet heard from him. So she said to stay in the house, stay where I know you're safe. I need to stay at home in case your brother calls. And so I spent, I think, probably it's probably about 4 or 5 hours in this woman's house watching TV so that we could find out what was actually happening. She called me back about an hour and a half later saying that she had finally heard from Aaron, that he was in the library, and that he had spent the majority of what was going on in a science room and then gone to the auditoriums. So she says, I'm going to try to get hold of him. And the second I do, I'll come pick you up. I gave her the address. It took another 3 hours for her to get her way into the neighborhood because they quarantined it. You couldn't get in or out unless you had lived in the neighborhood. So she found a cop that she knew, luckily, and he let her in to get me. So she picked up Aaron, came and got me. We went to grab a couple kids from Leawood, because that was kind of a congregating point for most families. And then it took about 45 minutes to wind our way out of the neighborhood so that we could go home. And I remember getting home around dinner time and watching news for the next 24 hours.
Got out fairly quickly when the fire alarm went off. Again, didn't understand the urgency. I remember walking down the hallway with a friend. But I remember going to Leawood Park, and the teachers were standing on the sidewalk at the front of the park, so on the other side of the street from the school, but it felt like they were a shield. And I can't tell you in reality exactly how they were poised, but I remember I felt very protected because they were just lining up there. And I think that's another piece of why I want to be back in a school working here. So something happened, I don't know what it was, but everyone, started, something kind of erupted. And I remember hearing a particular teacher yelling at us to run, "You got to get out of here." And that was the first moment I really felt like I was in danger. I felt like I was running for my life. And I was afraid to look behind me. So I ran into the neighborhood. And I had a friend that lived just a couple blocks in. So probably a group of about 30 of us went to his house. I don't think we were in the same houses, but we just took turns calling our parents. We tried to watch the news. We listened to the helicopters. There were lots of people praying, lots of people crying. And eventually word got out that we needed to go to Leawood Elementary, and that was going to be our place where we'd find our parents. And in my memory, it was like 5 hours that I was just, in the house that I was in, it was actually, the dad was a cop, and he wanted us to all go down in like the lower level because he knew something significant was going on, and he didn't want any of us in the line of sight of anyone outside. So we were hiding, taking turns making the calls. Then finally we went over to Leawood Elementary, and I saw my dad. My dad picked me up, and he has red hair. He's not the most tan person, but I've never seen him look that pale. And he hugged me so tight, I had to tell him to let go because I couldn't breathe. And it still didn't hit me. I still didn't understand what was going on. I was 16, how much could I understand? But that was the first glimpse of how serious this was, because I've never seen my dad so shaken. And he, years later, he told me that when he was driving to come get me, he was listening to NPR. And the thing that stood out to him was a line, "The unthinkable has just happened at Columbine High School." And he said he pushed on the gas a little harder when he heard that. But I remember going home and just being in a daze for days, trying to figure out which way was up.
I was a freshman, and that day kind of unfolded like any other normal day. I was in the art classroom, which is about as safe and far away from any of the events of that day as you could be if you were attending school that day. The fire alarm went off, and I think we kind of all thought it was either an alarm or a senior prank. And so we were just kind of in that awkward standing up, what do we do, and that type of stuff. And then it wasn't until some students kind of ran by the classroom and yelled in, "This isn't a drill," that's when the red flags started to first, pop up. And so we walked out, like it was a fire drill, until we walked to the front of the school, and that's when we saw students kind of sprinting out and streaming out, and crying, and people discussing about guns and a gang fight, and whatever rumors were starting to circulate right at the beginning of the day. And my class just walked out to Clement Park, and we stood and waited for the policemen to show up, and at which point they sent us home. And I kind of remember thinking, well, what about class, later that day? That's where my head was. I was still worried about, like, well, I'm going to be marked absent, like unexcused absence. My parents are going to kill me. That's where I was. So then we went home, and that's when you turned on the news. I lived really close. You could see my house from the math wing. And so sitting in my house, you'd see the house, you'd hear the helicopters and see the news unfold, and you'd see your house. And so it really wasn't until I got home that I started to understand the scope, or even start to put the pieces together. And then I have an older sister that was a senior, and so she was in the building for a long time, and that was the hardest part of the day, was waiting, because we didn't have any communication, and you're waiting to hear from a friend. There was no way to kind of know where she was, and so that was the most stressful kind of piece of my day, was waiting for news from my sister, and getting that she was okay, and kind of watching the events unfold from the news.
Do it like that, sit like that, making it fast, bring it right back, do it like that.
Tomorrow will mark 25 years since the devastating Columbine High school shooting in Littleton, Colorado.
12 students and one teacher were killed when a pair of students opened fire during a school day in what became one of the most high-profile mass shootings in American history. Joining us now for more is author Dave Cullen. He wrote what I believe to be the definitive book on Columbine, which details the events and the stories behind that tragic day. Dave, thanks so much for joining us on what is always a somber occasion when we talk about Columbine. But I want to get your perspective on a couple of things here since that horrific day. According to the AP, as you know, there have been over 600 attacks since 2006, in which 4 more people have died. It did not include the perpetrator. We're talking about mass shootings.
Right.
The American Academy of Pediatrics says that there have been more school shootings in America in the past 5 years than the 20 years prior to that. As Anne-Marie said before we went to commercial, when Columbine happened, everybody in America was shocked. I mean, the last thing that people could probably piece together was Charles Whitman shooting from a tower in the 1960s in Texas. And now we have whole generations of Americans, young people, who live with the possibility of a mass shooting every day. What goes through your mind when you hear numbers like that?
I mean, it is just horrible. And, I have a diagram of it just sort of spiraling out. And, I researched this there's a new preface to my book, a new edition. We found 54 shootings since then where there's evidence, the killers left evidence that they were directly inspired or copying Columbine. And that's just the ones we know. Most people die in the act, so we don't know. And there's least twice as many of that who tried and didn't. So these people are directly following Columbine, and they're all as a result in Columbine. They're all the 25 years, and they're getting so much worse. And it's our worst cultural export ever, because this is going around the world now. Russia's got a huge problem. Finland, Sweden, France, Germany, Canada, Australia. There's several more. There was one. It was a knife attack in Siberia. So wow. This is out of hand and getting worse.
Often when we talk about the victims of school shootings, we talk about the people who have been killed. We talk about the deceased. But the fact of the matter is, the victims are also the survivors. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you were in the building or near the building, but not close to the shooter, it is trauma that you are living with. You've spoken to some of these survivors, and I don't think there's been a lot of research or study into the impact that this sort of experience has on their lives. But can you tell us a little bit more about some of the survivors that you've spoken to?
Sure. And before I forget, there has been some research when I wrote Parkland with the March for Our Lives kids. An expert on teen PTSD, said, I'm going to give you figures for the prevalence after things like from car crashes to rapes to all sorts of different things. And she said, I'm sure we don't have any data on mass shootings. And she got to me the next day and said, oh, we do have data. People have, studying this in the nearly 20 years then since Columbine. And and of course it's very high. But yeah, so the survivors, oh my God. Well, I will give you this sort of good news, bad news, mostly thing, which was the opposite of what I expected. And in general, the kids get past it, the adults don't. And, definitely not all, that's not everyone. That's sort of big picture. But the morning after Columbine, I was so unnerved, because the day of Columbine, I was there within the first hour. I was one of the first people there. And it was just like what you expect. Chaos, people crying, hugging each other, just emotions through the roof. The next morning was the opposite. Those kids walked around with a blank affect, like they had been lobotomized. And I talked to them. They could all tell me when, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., because it went off like that, like a switch when they're, and the psychiatrist told me that's when your brain shuts off. So I just thought oh my God, are they going to get over it? And by the way, they started asking me, how long will this last? Will it be okay? Blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know. I'll try to find out. So anyway, I just thought, oh my God, this may be a lost generation. And I didn't worry too much about the parents, they'll deal and over time, it took about 3 to 5 years for most of the kids to sort of move on and get past it. And the parents of a lot of the victims and a lot of other adults, teachers, got slightly better, but it was just a slow, the kids were going, 25 years later, one of the people that I'm very close to is an alcoholic, and tomorrow the person's family members will have to bring her home after any one of these apartment or anything. She just gets raging drunk, and they take turns of who's gonna make sure she gets home alive.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of people like that. And, not all. Some of them are fine too. But that's the weird thing that I did not expect.
Yeah.
It's still, as Anne-Marie said, seared into the minds of those of us who were not directly affected. But I can only imagine for the parents of the children who were killed and other family members who lost loved ones during that day. It's something that they have to live with every single day, and it's unimaginable. Except the fact that now there are many more Americans who are in the same boat as those families and those family members of the children and others who survived. Dave, thank you very much. Your book was I read it when it first came out. I'm glad you're updating it today, because so much has happened since Columbine. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Vlad and Anne-Marie. Appreciate it.
This is how AI optimizes my schedule. So I have a project coming up, so I start by listing the project and then setting a deadline. Every task manager does that, but here's where
the investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous. The two gunmen who went on the rampage booby-trapped the building and even themselves. All day long, investigators have searched the homes of both teenage killers. In one of them, police say they found bomb-making materials. Specially trained officers searching the school today found close to 30 explosive devices all around the building. Authorities have also revised the death toll, now saying 15 people were killed, including the two gunmen. Most of the bodies are still inside the school, but families of the murder victims have been notified. NJ Burkett begins our coverage. He is live in Littleton, Colorado. NJ.
And Roz, we're being kept far away. The building off in the distance is still sealed off. As you said, the bodies have not yet been removed. A total of 15 people are believed to have died here, 12 students, 1 faculty member, and the 2 young killers. Investigators say this attack appears to have been carefully planned for a long time.
One by one, students returned to Columbine High and left bouquets of flowers in a park half a mile away.
A little bit of pain, a little bit of everything at once. And it's deep, you know, but just got to be strong.
Parents, hug your kids. Pray that, be happy that you're with them. Kids, grab your friends, hold them tight, and never be mad at people because it could happen in a second that they'll be gone.
Investigators found their first pipe bomb in the parking lot, and the Denver bomb squad immediately sealed off the building. Robotic cameras later found the entire school was booby-trapped. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had apparently committed suicide, but investigators say they spent their final moments rigging the building and their own bodies with more than 24 pipe bombs. Amid the gunshots and bomb blasts, hundreds of students ran for their lives, stalked in their own school by 2 of their own classmates who went on a rampage.
People were getting shot all around me.
There was a guy at a table right next to me and her, and they just shot him and then walked away, and then he was just sitting there in a pool of blood.
Detectives now believe they entered the school through a back door and stormed down the hallways. They cornered students in the cafeteria and the library where there was nowhere to run. Witnesses say they laughed as they fired their weapons, executing their classmates who begged for their lives.
They were shooting anyone of color wearing a white hat or played a sport, and they didn't care who it was, and it was all at close range.
Screaming after they'd shoot up something, they'd go, woo! Just a pleasure for them.
This morning, students packed a prayer service at a local church and stood in the parking lot, embraced one another, and wiped away their tears. Graduation was less than 2 weeks away. Amber Burgess is Columbine High School's homecoming queen.
I don't even know if people are going to be able to walk back in the school again and see empty chairs, and it'll be horrible.
Now, they have been attempting to identify the bodies inside the school all day today. At a news conference just a few minutes ago, the county prosecutor updated reporters on their efforts to identify the bodies.
We have completed tentative notifications to, I believe, all of the family members of the people who are still inside the school. Only 2 of the victims have been removed, at least the last time I was down at the scene. We have a number of others that are still at the scene, but we've completed those tentative identifications to the families and notified them that based on descriptions and other criteria that they have provided to us, that we've been able to identify them.
That now the latest word from the county prosecutor here. Once again, to recap, 15 people dead, 16 people hospitalized, 5 of them in critical condition. Live tonight, Littleton, Colorado, NJ Burkett, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, NJ, thank you. President Clinton saying he and his aides are struggling to understand why all of this happened. The president said early intervention is the key to preventing trouble.
We must all do more to recognize and look for the early warning signals that deeply troubled young people send often before they explode into violence. Surely more of them can be saved and more innocent victims and tragedies can be avoided.
The White House says President Clinton may visit Littleton, Colorado at a time when it is best for the community. Ross?
The two killers belong to a group of students that named itself the Trenchcoat Mafia, and we are beginning to learn more about these teenagers. Stacey Sager is live in the Eyewitness Newsroom with that side of the story. Stacey.
Well, Roz, they wore black trench coats, combat boots, and some wore Nazi crosses. They hated jocks, loved the internet, and were fascinated by World War II. They were known as the Trenchcoat Mafia. The question is, why didn't anyone know they'd turn so violent?
The clues were here in Littleton long before the deadly violence. The yearbook pictures with handwritten captions about insanity. This alleged Trenchcoat Mafia website shut down shortly after ABC News took these pictures. It even had a so-called hit list, mentioning jocks and one substitute teacher as potential targets. And there were the outfits, the dark coat and boots associated with Hollywood's more violent scenes. But no one knew the talk would become reality.
It's just a gang of about like 20 guys call themselves the Trenchcoat Mafia. They like wear trench coats every day to school, and wear makeup and paint their nails and stuff. They're just like, I don't know, everyone kind of thinks of them as different, and they always just hang out with themselves only.
I mean, they looked like, they sort of had vibes of, not exactly loving everyone. But I mean, they never walked around the halls, saying, you're all gonna die.
Students also say that members of the small suburban gang bragged about their guns and ammo. One cyber chatter even recalled a previous warning that a certain El Caress wrote about preparing for the big April 20th. You're all gonna be sorry. Terrorism experts widely know that this time of year has been extremely violent throughout history. April 19th is the anniversary of many painful moments, from Waco to Ruby Ridge to Oklahoma City. And this past April 20th was the 110th anniversary of Adolf Hitler's birthday.
April 20th might just turn out to be a watershed date for an event such as what occurred in Colorado, and might in the future precipitate other types of events like this.
Experts we talked to feel it is tragic the isolation and hatred went undetected at the school, yet they say the key to preventing future violence may really lie with parents and kids at home.
Teach them they're allowed to express their anger in words. They're not allowed to act on them. If they don't act on it with you, they will learn how to control their anger as they get older.
Now, police have been interviewing the family members of the two teenagers responsible for the shooting. We now know that one of them, Eric Harris, also posted violent lyrics and recipes for pipe bombs on the internet. And his final entry in an AOL chat room, which was posted yesterday morning at 8:41, read, "Today is my last day on Earth." Rob.
Disturbing. Thank you, Stacey. The Vatican led world reaction to the horror in Colorado. Pope John Paul is calling on Americans to respect the dignity of human life. In London and other major capitals around the world, the shooting grabbed the headlines, knocking the war in Kosovo off of the front pages. A Tokyo paper labeled America as a sick gun society, and Australia's Prime Minister called the shooting an act of terrorism.
Navigating past adverts on your favorite websites is a daily annoyance for millions of internet users. Websites load slowly, pop-up.
Every day before my feet hit the ground, I recite the names of Cassie Bernal, Stephen Kernow, Corey DePuter, Kelly Fleming, Matt Kechter, Daniel Mauser, Danny Rohrbaugh, Dave Sanders, Rachel Scott, Isaiah Scholes, John Tomlin, Lauren Townsend, and Kyle Velasquez, and they give me the inspiration to do, after the event happened at Columbine, to go back and do that, and I continue to speak on their behalf and trying to help others in dealing with events such as ours.
The reaction of so many people today was, oh no, not again. Another high school, Columbine High in Littleton, Colorado, this time on the edge of Denver. It has been a horror. The gunman, fellow students who rushed the school and opened fire for reasons we do not know yet, for reasons we may never know.
On April 20th, 1999, my sister and I got into a little argument that morning. I had made us late to school. I had to have my hair just perfect. And she was getting on to me about making us late, and we got into this fight, and she pulled up, and she actually would drop me off at the front of the school, and then went to go park even though I was making us late. And I got out and slammed the car door shut on her, and I walked in the school. I had no idea that would be the last time I would see her.
My secretary comes running in, and And it's so vivid, as if it was yesterday. She comes running in. I had a little paneled window on my door, and and I said, something's wrong. And she said, Frank, there's been a report of gunfire and pipe bombs. And I'm thinking, this can't be happening. I've been there for 20 years, probably count on two hands the number of fights we had or any types of violence or things.
And someone ran through the room. I'm not quite sure who it was, yelling, "Get down." I think it took a second for, us all to look around, but realizing that everyone in that very crowded cafeteria, there was hundreds of us in there, everyone sort of slowly gotten down onto the ground.
It was near the end of the school year, so I thought maybe some seniors were pulling a prank. And then a teacher ran to the room. She was very frantic, and she started yelling at all of us to hide and get underneath tables. I get underneath the table, not knowing what's going on. My two friends just very, very scared and frantic, but I felt like I heard just an inner voice tell me to be still. And so I became very quiet and very still. They saw my friend Isaiah at my school. Isaiah was one of the very few African-American students. And so one of them called the other one over and started to call Isaiah racial slurs. They tried to drag him out from underneath the table, and they shot and killed Isaiah. They shot and killed my friend Matt, and they left me under there. I thought I was going to die. I can't tell you how thankful I was to be alive. At the same time, I felt I didn't know what to call it then. It was survivor's guilt, but I felt bad that I left my friends underneath that table.
Every time there's a shooting, it brings back the trauma. It's heartbreaking to see this happen again and again and again, and sort of having, frankly, I have very little hope that things will change, because things should have changed after Columbine.
But we continue, and people hear about it and said, okay, how many this time? We can't get to the point saying that this is how our country has to be, that we accept this. We have to stand up to say enough is enough.
For me, when I hear about another shooting, I'm just convinced to keep trying to make a positive impact. My sister was wanting to start a chain reaction of kindness and compassion. Since then, my family and I have been sharing her story across the country and across the world. And her story has become a real inspiration to millions of students. A month before the shooting, she wrote an essay for her class, and she titled it, "My Ethics, My Codes of Life." And in it, she talked about looking for the best in life. She talked about looking for the good in other people. And she had this theory. She said, I have this idea, this theory, that if one person will go out of their way to show compassion, it will start a chain reaction of the same. And people will never know how far a little bit of kindness can go. She felt like she was going to impact millions of people. When she was 13, she traced her hands like this on the back of an old dresser. And in the center of one of the hands, she said, these hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday to touch millions of people's hearts.
It was supposed to be just another school day at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. What happened there on April 20th, 1999, however, has gone down in history as one of the nation's worst criminal acts. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold unleashed their fury at the world when on that Tuesday they entered school grounds and went on a 49-minute rampage that left 15 people dead and 23 others wounded. The violence began outside of the building, where they shot classmates out eating lunch. They roamed the halls and the cafeteria, setting off bombs and shooting indiscriminately. Most of the carnage, though, took place in the library. There, the 18-year-old Harris and the 17-year-old Klebold taunted students who hid under desks. They shot some at point-blank range and killed others by shooting randomly under tables. One survivor, who was badly injured, was able to crawl out a window where SWAT team members carried him to safety. It would become one of the most indelible images of that day. Outside the school, chaos reigned as students and faculty were led out by police with their hands up. They then sprinted to friends and loved ones for emotional reunions. Back inside, Klebold and Harris, who'd killed 12 classmates and a teacher, committed suicide, though it would be the next day before authorities deemed the school safe for others to enter. By then, a makeshift memorial of crosses had sprung up, and the school's name had become synonymous with violence. Jackie Bashara, The Associated Press.
One of those students was Casey Johnson. She was planning to watch tonight's interview because 17 years later, she has questions she still wants answered.
Columbine probably crosses my mind every day still.
Casey Johnson remembers every detail of that day in the lunchroom. She has the scars as her constant reminders, even the newspaper clippings.
The bullet came in back here and left a big hole, shattered this whole third of my arm, and came out the front.
Casey spends a lot of time sharing her story, speaking to groups about tissue donation. That's what helped save her arm. And opening up to other victims around the country about how to take the next steps after experiencing something no one should ever have to deal with.
There was no mercy from the shooters. He yelled at me after he shot me, and I thought he'd shoot me again. So I closed my eyes and pretended to be dead.
Yet mercy is what Johnson is willing to show to the parents of the two boys who left her for dead.
I don't have angry feelings toward the parents. I don't think that any parent raises their child to be a murderer.
What Casey does have? Questions.
What did you see? Like, do you feel like you missed something, or were you involved?
So you would be willing to sit down with the parents face to face?
I think I would.
She's not haunted so much by flashbacks or PTSD anymore. Her 4 kids are now her focus, and all she can think about is protecting them.
So every time I drive up to the school and drop them off, I'm, saying a prayer over the school and over my kids, and every single day I pick them up, I'm thankful to be bringing them home. It's a real choice and battle for me to let them out the door to go to school.
And here's what she wants you to know.
If I got to say something about Columbine, it would be that the good has won.
Now, Casey became a nurse because of her Columbine experience, and that's how I met her. She took care of my dad 10 years ago when he was dying of cancer. She had to quit nursing because she will never have full use of her arm and faces more surgeries, but she has an amazing attitude.
Hard to believe tomorrow is the 20th anniversary of the shootings at Columbine High School in Colorado. We're talking about 12 students, one teacher killed by 2 students who then took their own lives.
For many of us, it was a day that we will never forget. And for Patrick Ireland, it was a day that forever changed his life.
Hi.
Hi, good to see you.
Really cool that we're still friends and close together and still hang out.
What's up, brother?
How goes it?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It just seems like just a blur of how quick it's gone by, and I was 17 at the time. The way that I think back about it is honestly a sense of pride and hope, just knowing that everything that we went through and what we survived, and that picture or that video or that view, essentially of me, student fighting for their life, trying to get out, and ultimately that being a sense of hope and hopefully what could be conveyed as, a beacon of light and strength and courage. That's probably the biggest concern that I have, is that I don't want her to feel, fearful of going to school, because we had such a great experience growing up in this community and elementary school through high school. We're not going to let, the events of that day define us. And that's not going to be, negative impact for the rest of our life.
By the way, Patrick and his classmates will attend a remembrance ceremony. It's going to happen tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Then they're going to spend the rest of the day volunteering for projects around the community to give back.
Oh, what a great way to remember that day.
Nothing like this has ever happened in American history. For this kind of scenario, there is no protocol.
And then he came into the library and shot everybody around me. Then put a gun to my head and said, asked if we all wanted to die and he was going to kill us.
We also have to take this moment once again to hammer home to all the children of America that violence is wrong.
Do you know if anybody's injured? Yes. They've got pipe bombs, Uzis, you name it, buddy. You're shitting me. I'm not. A student hit in the spine at Columbine. Okay. We've got another kid Columbine. Shot in the head. He's shot in the head. Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. We have automatic weapons, okay? Yes. All right. Can you guys send lots the paramedics? So he's still under attack? Yes, sir. The school is still under attack. We got a couple kids out in the hall that are shot, so they're trying to get to them. And do not let anybody else in until we tell them to. Jefferson County 911. Hi, it's Izzy Povich at NBC News. Yes. We're calling about the school shooting. We're on the air live right now on MSNBC. Yes. Is that something you could just literally, I could patch you through to my control room and you could tell us on the air? Okay, literally, I can put you through right now. I understand that. Now they said he's gone to the library. He's in the building. Okay, he's gone to the library. He's in the building. Hi, this is Stephanie Phillips from Dateline. How you doing? Good, how are you? Fine, thanks. I love your show. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. I watch it every night. Thank you. You're welcome. Jefferson County 911. Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He has shot out a window. Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am? Yes. Okay. Yes, and the school is in a panic. And I'm in the library. I've got students down under the tables, kids. Heads under the table. I saw a student outside. I was in hold. Oh, dear God. Okay, I was on hold duty. I saw a gun. I said, what's going on out there? And he turned the gun straight at us and shot. And my God, the window went out. And the kid standing there with me, I think he got hit. We've got help on the way, ma'am. Okay. Okay. Oh, God. Stay on the line with me. Oh, God. He's shooting in the library right now. He's firing shots from the library. Firing shots in the library. Our way, do we need to leave? Okay, hold on here. Bridget, tell somebody inside the cafeteria. I'm going to have to try and get out here and call you back. Okay. Call them before trying to find out where I'm supposed to go and put me on hold for an hour. Hi, it's Wendy at CNN still. Oh, hi, Wendy. We're just taking names and numbers right now for the press. Okay. Get back to you? Okay, because Fox has somebody on now. Huh? Fox has somebody from your office. I know. We've talked to a whole bunch of people, and it's just, you can only do so many because we got so many more calls coming in. I got to get to my daughter at Columbine. I've been trying for an hour. I can't get anywhere near there. I got to get no information. Sir? Okay, calm down, okay? Well, I think we're entitled to information as parents on where our children are. We have a lot of units out there right now. Tell me, I can't get anywhere near it. I want to find out how to get in touch with my daughter. How do I get information on my daughter? I don't have any of that information right now. I do. Why in the hell not? Get over now. My son is Eric Harris, and I'm afraid that he might be involved in the shooting at Columbine High School. Involved how? He's a member of what they're calling the Trench Coat Mafia. Have you spoke with your son today, Mr. Harris? No, I haven't. Have they picked up anybody yet? Or they're still looking for suspects. Your son is with who? What gang? Well, they're calling them the Trench Coat Mafia. I just heard that term on TV. Stay low, because if you try to leave, I don't want you to get shot, okay? Stay very low and quiet. So he said, stay low and quiet. Stay right here. Nothing is lit, okay? Everybody be very quiet.
When the shooting was over, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had killed 12 students and 1 teacher. Dozens of others were wounded by the over 900 rounds of ammo that were fired. It is believed that the guns that they used were all legally purchased at stores and gun shows. And many of the bullets were bought at the Littleton Kmart just down the street.
Harris's diary also detailed ideas about hijacking an airplane and crashing it into New York City. Some may characterize that.
And everybody wanted to, and we split up into groups, and I was
performing things about heaven above. When others were ignoring and even talking and making fun of students who didn't fit in, Rachel was trying to reach out to them.
Cared so much about people. And through it all, there's this passion and this love that she had.
It had on, it had this rim around it, and I know it's just greet her and tell Gilligan hello.
All the time. I was like, you gotta stop that, come on now, you know, and she was just like, every day during 5th hour, she'd go and out to the smoker's pit, which is, you know, like 100 yards away from the school,
to smoke. I had her quit for prom, and on Tuesday, she was in the cafeteria during fifth hour instead of the smoker's pit.
You are so beautiful to me.
What has happened to us as a people that this should happen to us? What is wrong that such brutality can take place among our children?
She was full of life, and anything that she did, she was determined to do and go wherever she wanted to. And she just was full of drive and passion and life.
I essentially told her that her soul touched us all in a way that words cannot begin to describe, and that we were going to miss her more than any of us could ever begin to say, and that I loved her.
Right now, we don't have any idea. We got, like I said, we have people working on it. There are some theories. Some of the guys have brought up some ideas, but I haven't heard that, yes, it means this.
It's a timeline of planning in this thing. Is all I can say is that this has been on their minds, and they've been planning this particular thing. They've been building bombs for this particular thing for a considerable period of time. They've been acquiring weaponry for a considerable period of time. Now we want to find out where they got this stuff.
That's two separate calls that came to us. You'll be able to.
But we had a lot of this stuff that was laying out very visible in the house. I think I'd be a little concerned about my son's room if I went in there and I found sawed-off shotgun barrels sitting on. And a lot of this stuff was clearly visible, but the parents should have been aware of it.
In his
On April 20, 1999, a school shooting and attempted bombing occurred at Columbine High School in Columbine, Colorado, United States. The perpetrators, 12th grade students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, murdered 12 students and 1 teacher. 10 students were killed in the school library, where the pair subsequently committed suicide. 21 additional people were injured with gunshots, and gunfire was also exchanged with the police. Another 3 people were injured trying to escape the school. At the time, it was the deadliest school shooting in United States history. The crime has inspired several copycats, and Columbine has become a byword for mass shootings. In addition to the shootings, the attack involved several homemade bombs. 2 of these were placed in the cafeteria, powerful enough to kill or seriously injure all people within the area, although they failed to detonate. Their cars in the parking lots were made into bombs which also failed to detonate, and at another location away from the school, 2 bombs were set up as diversions, only one of which partially detonated. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you would like to view more of our videos. Have a nice day.
It's been revealed the Melbourne twin killed in a suicide pact with her sister wrote to the Columbine community after the high school massacre 11 years ago. Kristen Hermler asked for the gunman not to be judged because they were outsiders like her.
Shattered, the Hermlers arrived from the other side of the world, rushing to comfort surviving sister Candace and mourn their lost daughter Kristen, their only children, who'd made a desperate pact to die. In a statement, they thanked Denver for the outpouring of support and concern in what is an extremely difficult time. While police have solved the puzzle of which twin is which, more questions than answers remain, including why the 29-year-olds carried a photocopy of this article, a profile on the Columbine High killers, who in 1999 took 13 lives in this very region before simultaneously shooting themselves.
I don't believe that there is a connection. There may have been an interest, but nothing to indicate that they were planning to harm others, obviously other than themselves.
But after Columbine, it's now known the Hermler twins wrote to the local community saying that, like the gunman who shot up the school, they too felt bullied and ostracised in life. Any link to Columbine is enough to leave people rattled. The site of America's deadliest high school massacre is just 20 minutes down the road from where the Hermler twins plotted to take their lives. From their Melbourne school to their former workplace, friends are stunned and say the women came from a close and loving home.
These two girls that were so quiet but so lovely just decided that they weren't happy enough to live, I guess.
Police intend to interview their parents, who will then prepare to bring both daughters home. In Aurora, Colorado, Emma Dullymore, 10 News.
And anyone seeking support and information about suicide prevention can contact Lifeline on 131114.
A friend in the outfits they will wear on the day of the massacre. Long coats and dark glasses. On the left, Eric Harris, 18 years old. On the right, Dylan Klebold, 1 year younger. Two apparently ordinary teenagers who became monsters. It is here in Denver, a city of 3.5 million people in the heart of America, that our investigation begins. We arrive in Littleton, in the southern suburbs. The two killers lived here in this quiet residential part of the city. Dylan Klebold's parents lived here in a house set back from the street with a tennis court and private pool. There is a barrier which blocks access. Unsurprisingly, they do not wish to talk to journalists. Dylan Klebold, the shy one with the long hair, was born in 1981. His mother worked with handicapped children and his father was an engineer. They formed a tight-knit family. At junior school, Dylan Klebold was an able student who worked hard. He was even part of a program for precocious pupils. As small children, he and his friend Brooks Brown were inseparable.
I first met Dylan. It was the first day of first grade when everyone kind of picks out their best friend instantly, rather than trying to figure out who you like or who you'll get along with most. It's mostly based on physical. And Dylan and I were both the only tall, gawky, uncoordinated kids. We played Legos all the time when we were kids. So quite often he would come over after school.
A typical all-American sort of kid, Dylan Klebold was in the school's baseball team. He played the drums and spent the summer holidays at scout camp. Brooks Brown's parents often invited Dylan to the house, and they knew his parents well.
They weren't touchy-feely parents like that. It was more clinical, but they cared about their kids. They were there for their kids. You know, they didn't go out drinking. They didn't go out partying. These were parents that were home. They weren't abusive. Tom was anti-war, did not believe in guns. They didn't believe in spanking.
Dylan Klebold was a youngster much like any other, growing up in an uneventful way in an unremarkable white suburb of a wealthy city. Eric Harris, the second killer, arrived in Littleton at the age of 12. His father, Wayne Harris, was in the army and moved around a lot, depending on his transfers. Eric was a solitary boy who hadn't been able to put down roots anywhere. Randy Brown takes us to see the Harris' house, a short distance from his own home.
This is the Harris home with the open garage. Of course, they don't live there anymore. The fact that they both worked gave Eric free run of the house, and they never checked his room and never checked his basement, and got away with a lot.
Eric entered school in 1993. He became friends with Dylan Klebold. 5 years before the massacre, an infernal partnership had already formed. The two friends joined Columbine High School together in 1996, when they were both 15. At the time, Dylan had a friend called Devin Adams. As she approached her 16th birthday, she invited Dylan to her party.
When I first met Dylan, he was very shy. You know, he dressed like a pretty normal kid, jeans, t-shirts. He liked computers more than other kids, but besides that, he was fairly normal. He didn't know how to interact with people without another person there or something that he could talk about, like a movie or music or something.
Behind the reserved and normal Dylan she was familiar with, Devin would discover a rather darker side.
But he was just kind of goofy, had a really sneaky sense of humor. And he was really morose, and he'd make jokes about things that a lot of people don't make jokes about death and about just really dark things.
Dylan Klebold wrote down his sinister notions in a private diary. This journal has recently been made public by the authorities. Hundreds of pages have been scrutinized and scanned by the police. In them, Dylan Klebold recounted the pathetic details of his adolescent angst. He drew weapons, coffins, and headless warriors. In a twisted, nervous hand, he expressed his bitterness and revealed suicidal tendencies. He said, "My God, I want to die so bad. Not fair. I wanted happiness. I never got it. Let's sum up my life. The most miserable existence in the history of time."
Dylan, the whole time I knew him, never had a girlfriend and never talked about a girl he liked or anything. I mean, I know that there were girls he liked, and you could tell when he talked to them or looked at them, but he never had a girlfriend or anything, and it was never something we talked about. It wasn't something he was comfortable talking about.
Dylan Klebold also drew page after page covered in hearts. He was secretly in love with a pupil at Columbine and confided his feelings to his diary. The one who I thought was my true love is not even a shell of what I want the most. She in reality doesn't even know me. I have no happiness, no ambitions, no friends, and no love. Devin Adams also hung around with Eric Harris.
Eric had a huge crush on me, but I was dating one of his friends, so that wasn't going to happen. Apparently, he blamed me for really taking my boyfriend away from him and Dylan. He blamed me that their group of 3 friends was suddenly torn asunder by this woman. And it's true, I'm the Yoko Ono, apparently.
To my knowledge, even through the end of the shooting, their entire lives, they may have had girlfriends. And I say that very lightly. But they never had any steady girlfriends, and they died virgins.
Dylan Klebold is seen here, filmed by his friend Eric Harris, clowning around for the camera and mocking country music.
Here you are, my good friend Dylan, almost halfway to school. What's up? Doing our normal morning ritual, waking up. It happens. It has to.
It is 2 years before the massacre. The two teenagers record their juvenile exploits on film. At this period, they were expressing their aggressive tendencies through banal mockery and cynical pranks. These film documents have never been seen before on British television.
What the hell are you doing to my sister's bike?
Klebold and Harris were both intelligent, and they were both keen computer buffs. Their IT teacher at Columbine, Richard Long, took them on as assistants. They worked with him for an hour or two every day.
As students, they were very easy for me because it was a class that they were very excited to learn about the new technologies that were coming out, and it was extremely interesting for them. So I had no trouble at all. Yeah, I would say they were definitely above average in my class.
Eric and Dylan, who were perfectly normal, but they were bright. That's it.
Dylan was very smart, and you could just even tell by talking to him, his vocabulary was extensive. He was using a lot of high school kids just don't use multi-syllable words.
Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris were regarded as geeks and as marginal within the school's social framework. They were even called the outcasts. They didn't play any games or sports. They weren't particularly rich. They weren't particularly good-looking. In the Great Hall at the front of the school, there is an impressive showcase displaying the sports trophies won by Columbine High School, the pride of students and staff alike. But Klebold and Harris were never part of any team. A lack of enthusiasm for sports set them apart from the others.
Well, the topic Columbine was
So that's all we've got time for. Thanks for coming again. Much appreciated. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe. And I shall see you on the next one. Thanks again. See ya.